Shalom, and welcome once again to GMS Geography Lessons. Today's topic, we're going to deal with the journeys of Paul, or should I say Paul's first journey, his first missionary journey. All right, because we read the scriptures, we have understanding of what took place in the history, but you don't really think about the areas that or some brothers don't think about the areas where these men, were out there, doing the work. So the purpose for this channel, or not the channel, but for these particular type of shows, is to kind of give you an example or an idea of what was taking place at the time and what areas they were located in. All right. So Paul's first mission, he was at Antioch here in where you see Syria. This is Antioch here. There was a church here in Antioch. Now, one thing to note is that there's two Antiochs, one here in Syria and one here in Pisidia. All right, there were two Antiochs, and there were synagogues in both of them. All right, so when you read in the scriptures, you got to know the difference between the two of them. So Paul's first mission started off here, at Antioch. That's what they called Simeon Niger. All right, and that's what they were, called Christians first in Antioch. So this is where they were at Antioch, and this is a map of Paul's travels, where he started at, the beginning of his mission, and where he ended. Okay, now when you do a research and you checking these maps out, you got to check them, double check them, because some of these devils go off on these maps. So this one's pretty accurate. All right, so he started here in Antioch, right, and then he moved down to Seleucia, and he went, down to Cyprus, and all up through here through modern day Turkey, which they call Asia Minor. All right, so let's begin to read. This is Acts 13:1. It says, now there were in a church that was at Antioch, which you just saw, certain prophets and teachers, as Barnabas and Simeon that was called Niger, and Lucius of Cyrene, and Manaen, which had been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch, and Saul. As they ministered to the Lord and fasted, the Holy Spirit said, separate me Barnabas and Saul for the work whereunto I have called them. And when they had fasted and prayed and laid their hands on them, they sent them away. So they being sent forth by the Holy Spirit, departed unto Seleucia, which we were doing a test on Daniel's 11th chapter. Seleucia was named after the Seleucids that inhabited Syria at that time, which were Edomites that were called Greeks that lived in Syria. All right, so they departed unto Seleucia, and from thence they sailed to Cyprus. All right, and when they were at Salamis, they preached the word of the Most High in the synagogue of the Jews, and they had also John to their minister. And when they had gone through the isles unto Paphos, they found a certain sorcerer, a false prophet, a Jew, whose name was Bar Jesus. So now, this false prophet Bar Jesus, they started here at Antioch, which was Saul, which was later named Paul, and Barnabas. They went down into Seleucia. They taught there. Then they caught sail into Cyprus, and they stopped at Salamis, and then they came to Paphos. Now here in Paphos, this is where they encountered Bar Jesus the sorcerer. So when you read about, oh, thou mischievous, a child of the devil, when you read about the story about Bar Jesus, now you know exactly where Paul and Barnabas were at when this particular thing happened. All right. Then from there, after they taught there, then they sailed up into Perga. All right. So we're going to go back and jump down here. It says, now when Paul and his company loosed from Paphos, they came to Perga in Pamphylia. So Perga is in Pamphylia. This is Perga here, and this is Pamphylia. So this land was called Pamphylia, and then this particular town was called Perga. All right. It says, they came to Perga and Pamphylia, and John departing from them returned to Jerusalem. That's why Paul had a big fight with Barnabas, because this is the same John, or Mark, which was his surname. When he left at Jerusalem, he left them doing the work. He didn't finish. It says, but when they departed from Perga, they came to Antioch in Pisidia, and went into the synagogue on a Sabbath day and sat down. So they went from Perga, they went from Paphos to Perga, up into Antioch in Pisidia. This land is Pisidia here, and this is Antioch. There was a synagogue here. Now this is the synagogue where Paul and Barnabas argued, with the Jews, the Jews about the Israelite foreigners. That's where the Jews got envious because the Gentiles or the Israelite foreigners came the next Sabbath day to hear the word of the Lord, and Paul was teaching them, and then the Jews got mad, and then Paul basically cursed them out and said, "Look, since you put this far from you, we turn to the Gentiles, or we turn into the Israelite foreigners." So this particular synagogue in Antioch here in Pisidia, in modern day Turkey, this is where that whole thing went down, when they was arguing back and forth, about that issue, and then from there, after they went through that whole ordeal, and they basically wanted to stone him. They left from there, or really it was a big argument that went down. So they left from there and went down into Iconium. All right. So we're gonna jump down to the end of the chapter, so you brothers can read the whole, the history. I'm just hitting certain points. It says, "And the word of the Lord was published throughout all the region, all that region there, meaning in Antioch." All right. It says, "But the Jews stirred up the devout and honorable women and the chief men of the city and raised persecution against Paul and Barnabas." So they started persecuting them and expelled them out of their coasts. But they shook off the dust of their feet against them and came unto Iconium. And the disciples were filled with joy and with the Holy Spirit. And it came to pass in Iconium that they went both together into the synagogue of the Jews, and so spake, that a great multitude both of the Jews and also of the Greeks believed. All right. So now they were here in Antioch, they went down to Iconium, and then from Iconium they went down into Lystra. Now here in Lystra, when you read about in the scriptures where Paul got stoned, where he got put to death, this is the area where he got put to death, here in Lystra, okay, in so-called modern day Turkey, or they call Asia Minor. So when you read the scriptures about Paul getting stoned, he was stoned here in Lystra, and he actually was dead, and they pulled him outside of the city, because they thought he was dead, which he really was. But the Lord put the Spirit back in him, because when you read in Corinthians, the 12th chapter, I believe it's 2 Corinthians, the 12th chapter, Paul spoke about how he was in the Spirit and he went before the throne of the Lord and he saw unspeakable things, that were not, in other words, he couldn't explain them. So this is where he was at when that particular thing happened. All right. It says they were aware of it. So it says, and verse Acts 14:5, and when there was an assault made both of the Gentiles and also of the Jews with their rulers, to use them despitefully and to stone them, they were aware of it, and fled unto Lystra and Derbe, cities of Lycaonia, and unto the region that lieth round about. So this is here, they ran to Lystra and to Derbe, and Derbe, if you brothers that are up on it, Derbe is the city or the town where Paul met Timothy, where he circumcised him and brought him with him for the ministry. This is where Timothy was from, here in Derbe. Okay, and just as a footnote, this is Tarsus. This is where Paul was born. This is where he lived, in Tarsus. All right, a city of Cilicia. Okay, all right. So they were here in Derbe, Lystra and Derbe, cities of Lycaonia, and unto the region that lieth round about. So they were all up in that area teaching the word. All right. So we jump down to verse 19, and it says, "And there came thither certain Jews from Antioch and Iconium." So you had Jews, some of them wicked Pharisees and Sadducees, that came from the synagogue in Antioch and Iconium, and came down to where Paul and Barnabas were at, right? And there came thither certain Jews from Antioch and Iconium, who persuaded the people, and having stoned Paul, drew him out of the city, supposing he had been dead. Howbeit, as the disciples stood round about him, he rose up and came into the city, and the next day he departed with Barnabas to Derbe. See, so they killed him, and basically they killed him in Lystra, and then he went to, he really wasn't dead, but he was. His spirit had left his body, but the Lord brought his spirit back. So then he went with Barnabas down to Derbe. And when they had preached the gospel to that city and had taught many, they returned again to Lystra. All right, so now they're backtracking. So they taught here at Derbe, and they backtrack back to Lystra. All right. It says, and to Iconium and Antioch. So they went from Derbe to Lystra, back to Iconium, and into Antioch in Pisidia. All right. So let's jump down. It says, confirming the souls of the disciples and exhorting them to continue in the faith, and that we must through much tribulation enter the kingdom of the Most High. And when they had ordained the elders in every church and had prayed with fasting, they commended them to the Lord on whom they believed. And after they had passed throughout Pisidia, they came to Pamphylia. All right, so you have Pisidia, which is the city where Antioch was at, and then they came down to this place here in Pamphylia, the land of Pamphylia. All right, it says, and when they had preached the word in Perga, they went down into Italia. So they were here preaching in Perga, and then they went down into Italia. You notice these are sea coasts. That's why they first landed in Perga, and now they're going to take off from Italia. Because these are seacoast cities, and that's where you had ships laden there, ready to take people wherever, or merchandise or people wherever they wanted to go. It says, and then sailed to Antioch, from whence they had been recommended to the grace of the Most High for the work which they fulfilled. So after they taught the word, they came down to Italia, and then they sailed back to Antioch in Syria. All right. So that was a loop that they went through. That was Paul's first missionary journey, and he went with Barnabas on this one, and they went throughout these different cities teaching the word, and those that accepted was beautiful, and the ones that didn't accept it, they wiped the dust off their feet. So with that, this has been GMS geography lessons. I hope you brothers learned something, and to the next time, I say shalom.